I'm going to show you how to completely hang a double set of doors. Now just to start, just to get the basics behind how a door should be hung, that's where we'll start. So we have our opening. We're going to do two 18-inch doors. So together that's a 36-inch. Now I just want to check my opening and make sure it's big enough, and it's 38.25. And how that works is if you have a 36-inch door, your opening should be 2.25 wider, 2.25 higher. Now with these double doors, it should actually be 2.5, but I know I can make this work. Now to start, we're going to put lino on this floor, but we want to get the doors hung. It's a long story about painting and all that jazz, but you know, we'll have that on the site if you need information on that. And we want to get the doors hung. We'll do all our trim after the flooring's in. Now the flooring, to allow for the thickness of it, we're going to put 3/16 inch blocks underneath the jambs, so that when they come to install, they can just tuck it underneath the doors. And that's where it all begins. What you want to do is, if you have a pre-hung door set up like this, first thing I do is I make sure that I have the tops, all that, I have it all figured out so that my tops are pointing up. And you'll see why that's important. So basically the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that everything is level, so that when my door frame is in place, that the top is going to be perfectly level, because I can't shim one side up and one side down. It has to be level, because if I change the height where it sits on the floor, I might have a gap on my lino, who knows how much, right? So you want to just make sure that that's level. So let's do that right now. I don't want to jump around on you too much. This is the very first step that I like to take. And it's basically, you're just assessing the doorway. Now I don't have my blocks in place yet. I don't need them, because if it's level, it'll be level no matter what. Now today you're probably going to see I'm not going to be the most graceful, because it is a little bit tricky hanging doors just because of all the elements involved. So I may not look that graceful, but we'll get the job done. So I want to place these just roughly 1/8 to 1/4 away from the wall, basically where the door is going to actually truly sit, close anyway. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to stick them out past the wall a little bit, and I'm going to get my level out, and I'm just going to check the tops of these. Now I do recommend getting a good level. Don't use anything that's a little iffy. Like, get a good level, even if you have to rent one. It'll make your job go a lot quicker when you're hanging doors. So then I'll just judge by the bubble. It has to be dead on. I don't want it, you know, close. It has to be perfect. Which it is, okay? Now, yeah, okay, perfect. This situation is ideal. But I want to show you how to fix it if you need to. Okay, if your door frames are out of level, I want to show you how to fix it. Now, let's just say we're out of level. Regardless, you want to mark, let's say, the one side that's out. Then I always just take my level up to where it's perfect, and let's say it's right there. Okay, so now what that means is that the left side over here actually has to be cut down in order to make it level. You can't, because this side needs to go up, or the left side needs to go down. So what I'll do is, all you have to do now is just measure the distance between those lines. And just be really careful, just make sure it's correct in your head, because I know this step can really mess you up. You can cut the wrong side of the jamb, and then you're double out twice as much, I guess. So we'll just measure that, which is a 1/8. So after you get it all straightened out in your mind, you know exactly which jamb to cut. Double check, triple check if you have to. we're going to cut this one down by 1/8. Now just, you have to keep in mind, you always cut off of the bottom. Don't cut the top off because then your door won't close. If you cut the top down, your door will hit the top of the jamb. So always just cut from the bottom. We don't need to do that today. It is level. So I know in my mind, as I'm assessing the doorway, we're good to go that way. Now, this rule is important no matter what door you hang, just to get a feel for how everything is in the opening. So I want to just check this one for plumb this way. I want to see if it's vertical, I want to see if it's toed in, splayed out. And it's really good, like if anything that bottom's kicked in a little bit, I can even just make a mark. I could just put a little mark that if anything the bottom's kicked in. If it is, it's like a 16th. So, you know, you want to assess that. And like I say, I always hold my level on plumb or level just to get a feel for which way the door is out. Sometimes you got to think about it. Yeah, so this bottom is toed in a little bit as well. The reason you want to assess this is because if the door is kicked both directions like that, then you want to set one side of your door frame tight at the top, and then it'll go loose at the bottom, and so on. So you can compensate for what the bottom is out. I also have videos on that on a different part of the site, so you can check that out. Okay, so this one's pretty good. I just actually want to measure the bottom because I think they're both kind of toed into towards each other. But we're still 38.25. Yeah, so we're good there. Now you want to check it this way. You want to check this wall for plumb, and you want to check this one. And really, the worst scenario for hanging a door is if they're twisted, and that's why your framing is so important. Do a good job of your framing, your finishing is that much easier. So, and the last thing you want to assess before you start hanging your door is just check it for plumb this way. So you want to just check both sides. Now, what I find is the worst scenario is if the door frames are twisted. So they can be at a plumb one way as long as they're out the same direction. But if they're twisted like that, then you have to get a little more creative on how you're going to hang your door. We'll cover that too. Okay, so let's just check it, because dang it, Kody. The reason, like I said before, let's just check this thing for plumb. Let's just assess what's happening here. Now, it's good there, like it's really good. Now this one is just slightly out. I'll just check the other side though as well. And I just like to do is I'll just hold my level where I need it. So the bottom is actually just kicked out that direction, just slightly. But just so you know, that way you're not surprised later on. So I just want to recap that. Okay. So just to go over the things to assess before you even start hanging your door is you want to just check it for level. So you want the floor to be level, or at least to transfer up so that the top of your jamb is level. So you want that good to go. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going online. Then you just want to check your opening this way to see if it's both sides are plumb, if it's toed in or crooked. Then you can adjust your door to how you hang it so that it, you know, when you work your way to the bottom, if the bottom's kicked in, it'll throw your door off. So, and you want to just check it to see if it's on a plumb this way, or if it's twisted. So those are a few things you want to check before you go. Everything looks really good here. We're gonna start. Oh, dang it. So everything looks good with this doorway. I know what's going on now. I know that when I put my 2 jam legs in place that the top is level. So now I'm just going to go and fasten this all together and we're going to start. So I've set my jam on those 3/16 blocks. I have it just sitting here loose. Now just to start, what I always like to do is I like to just get it where I want at the top, and I like to just kind of cinch the top together. And I like, now that I know that this opening is where I want it, I'm just going to center this door frame. Alrighty. So this takes a little bit of effort. But I'll show you what I'm going to do. To make it easier for me, I'm going to grab my brad nailer. This is how I've been doing it the last few days, doing these doors, is I'll just get the one side, make sure it's centered, and then I'll just tag with my brad nailer. So just put pressure on the door there. See if I'm centered. I got to come over a little bit, so we'll just shim that. Okay. Alright. Just compare that gap, I can go a little bit more. You can see how graceful a guy can be doing this. But once you get going, it gets a lot easier. And once you get one door under your belt, then it's a lot easier. I want that deadly center because I don't have a lot of room to play with. Okay. Alright. Now I'm just going to tag this. I'm looking and I'm comparing that I'm flush on each side with the drywall. I'm just going to tag this once. I'm using a 21 gauge brad nailer. It's by far my favorite. Regular size is 18, so it means it's a thicker nail. The 21 is just so nice for finishing. I wouldn't, if this thing broke down today, I'd go buy another one right now. I would never use anything like this. That's just my preference. So I'm just going to tag that on the lower side of those shims, just so that I can add more later, or if I want to screw it, I have room to put a screw through my shims as well. But I just want to go through how I know where to fasten on this before we get too carried away. Is these doors are standard size, they're 1 3/8 thick. Okay, so you can measure 1 3/8, and then so the door sits flush to the outside here, and you can notice that my hinges are all would point out that way. Everything's on the same side. My ball, how are they called? Ball catches, they're on the same side. So is this. Same goes with a normal door. If your hinges are pointing out that way, so is your latch. So you want to make sure of that as well. So what will happen is the door will sit flush on the outside of the jamb here. It'll sit in 1 3/4, or 1 3/8, sorry. 1 3/4 is the other size. Then your door stop will sit behind that to allow so that when you close your door, it doesn't swing inwards. And then I just find center of the door stop, which is 2 inches. Then I know that my door stop will cover any fasteners that I put through the jamb. So what we do is you just go from the side where your door sits flush, and you just mark 2 inches in everywhere. I usually go at each hinge point, bottom, top, and in between everything, and I just make 2-inch marks everywhere. Then I know where I need to fasten later. It's a little hard to see on this pre-stained jamb, but that's okay. So whatever, you get the point. Mark 2 inches in from the side that your hinges are on. Okay? Then I know where to fasten. So that's one step. That's another thing you need to know. Now what I'll do is I'll just tag this other side. And I can put a little bit more pressure on here. center the jam, make it flush on each side with the drywall. Okay, it's good there. Now if you put too much pressure in at the top here, or if your shims are down further, you can just bow that jam in right away. So don't put a ton of pressure, just enough to hold it. Once again, I'm just putting one nail in. Now the very important thing with these double doors is they're a lot harder than a regular door. You don't have any leeway, you can't cheat anything. This side has to be perfectly plumb. So does this side. Because if one's kicked in, this door will sit higher than the other. If it's kicked out slightly lower, this door will sit down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very lightly tag everything. I'll keep double checking. Once everything is the way I want it, I will put a screw in, just basically 2 screws on each side, so that way if I have to tweak anything, my jam isn't fully set, because it is a pain if you think, oh man, I'm doing such a good job, you totally set your jam, then you realize, well, I got to change something. So I'm just going to lightly brad nail it, enough to hold it, double check. Right when I'm going to hang my doors, I'll put a couple screws, because these doors are solid core doors, they're heavy, I don't want them kicking anything out of place. But for now, with these, just the one brad on each side, I can just tap it if I need to tweak it, okay? So the tops are set. Now, if you want to, you can always, if your frame is out of square a little bit, you can always just kick the bottom tight and then hold your level on there, just to make sure that your jam can come inward. If it has to go out that way at all, and you're already tight at the bottom, then you have to readjust the top. So it looks, yeah, so it's got to come in a hair. I can double check this side, just keep it tight, you know, and perfect. They both have to come in is what you want. Now the other thing with these is this direction, they don't have to be exactly plumb, but they have to be, if your doorway is out, let's say, it has to be out the exact same amount, because if these two doors, when they come together, you don't want them kicked like that. And that's what controls that, is where the hinges lie. So if these two jam legs are twisted at all, so are your doors. If they're out of plumb, that's not the end of the world, as long as they're out the same degree as each other. So when they come close, the doors flush all the way up. So that's why it's harder to hang double doors. You just got to be that much more precise, but that's okay. We're going to show you how to do it. So you just get lots of shims. Now I normally cheat. I usually have a level that's the full length of this, so it's easier, but I'll show you a way to do it. This is a 5-foot level. You can do it with a 4. I'll show you how to do it this way, because a full length level is probably too much of an investment if you're just doing a small job. Okay, I'm going to just check it this way first. I want to make sure it's going to get, like, I hope I don't bore you, but you know, this is how it has to be done. You have to just keep double checking, triple. I want to just, and like I said before, get a good level, because this thing is bang on. I know that it is. So that's dead on there. I'll just basically set this one. Basically just flush it on either side, check what's going on. It's very close. If anything, the bottom could come in, or the top could come out. We'll tweak that later. Now I just want to set this nice and vertical. So what I do is I always make sure that it's at the top. I basically always put my level where the doorstop's going to go. And now, actually we should go through a little a tip as well. If you're hanging, when you're hanging your door, you always want to shim, if anything, you want the thicker side of the shim on the side where your hinges are. That, and I'll show you why. Grab a hinge here. Okay, if anything, you want the jamb to sit kicked in a little bit like that, if anything. Not a lot, but just enough. Because if you shim it the other way, and you put the thick side in, and the thin end in where the hinges are, where that pivot point is, what will happen is your jamb will kick out like that. That'll cause your hinge to kick out, and it'll become hinge bound right here. And you'll know that by when you hang your door, and you go to close it, but it doesn't close all the way, it just kind of bounces. That means that you're hinge bound. So you got an issue with how the jamb's not square. So you want to, if anything, you always want to shim this direction. You just got to keep your eye on it. So you do that. Now don't go, the other thing is don't leave it sticking out the very thick end right on your hinges. What happens there is you have to cut these off after. It's really hard, especially when you only have like 2 or 3 inches here. You have to cut these shims off. It's too hard to cut when they're thick. So I always just, if I need, I'll use 2 or 3 so that it's easy to cut. I can just cut, break them off later, and that way, because you always have to have them shim behind your hinges, and your hinges are usually, not in this case, but usually on the inside corner. You'll see what I mean when you do it yourself. Okay, let's get raw. Okay, so I'm just going to double check this way to make sure we're good. Okay, perfect. Now you can do it one of 2 ways. Always make sure you're at the very top, in line with where the doorstop goes. Now you can put shims in right here and make it perfectly plumb right to this point, but I'm just going to try doing it right where the hinges, and then you'll see how it goes. But I'm going to just set that. You just have to make sure that the bottom isn't kicking out like this and affecting the level. You want to make sure that this is kicked in at all. Then you can tweak it for plumb right here. Okay, so I got to come over a bit more. I want to double up on those shims. Now, depending on your framing, you might want to go this way with one, but use a thicker one going this way, just to make sure you keep that kicked in a little bit. Just depends on how it's framed as well. Just going to try doubling these. I'll just stick one out further than the other, just to kind of keep with nice taper. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to set this point on this hinge perfectly plumb. I'll just sit, just going to tweak it in just a hair. You know, it's a lot of fucking around. So that's perfect there. Has to be perfect. I'm just going to lightly tag one brow nail. I'm going to go near the bottom of my shims because I want to make sure that I get a screw through the center of these. So I'm just going to go at the bottom and just take or angle it upward. Just one in there. If you fasten below or above your shims, it's a little trickier because it'll put more pressure this way. It'll cause it to kind of come in and blow out above it. So just keep that in mind as well. Once again, do the old double check. Make sure that this isn't bulging out and making this teeter-totter on that point. Okay, good. Now I know that this point is where I want it. Now I can just set my level all the way down. And then I'll make this very bottom, from the middle hinge to the very bottom, nice and plumb. I think what I'll do is I'll just push it in all the way. And then I'll just shim it until it comes out where I want it. And then I'm going to check the top level as well. Okay, that's good. Now, you want to make sure that you have some pressure on there so when you nail it, it doesn't affect it, it doesn't suck it in tighter. Just going to shim it a hair more. Okay. I always like to keep pressure on there so my shim doesn't fall out of place. And then remember to just 2 inches in, throw one quick brad nail in there. Okay, so now that it's perfectly plumb, I want to double check this side, make sure this is exact. Because it's easier for me with my framing being very close that I make it exactly plumb. That way this other side I can make it the same. It's just easier. If it's off a bit, it's a little trickier, but you can do it. So the bottom's got to come out. Actually, the top's got to go in a little bit. I can cheat that. Just making sure, just a hair more. The more exact I am now, the more likely this thing's going to end up in my favor. Just making sure. Okay, I'm just going to go in a little bit more. Sorry, I know it's getting a little boring, but I just pull my level where it goes plumb, then I know which direction the jam needs to go. It's not very much. I'm actually going to kick this bottom outward now to compensate a little bit for that. We'll double check. Or maybe I'm on my 5th check, I don't know. Okay, that's good. Now what I'm going to do, since I've already kind of messed with those, I'll just put another nail in. But no more than that. Okay. So once you know that this is plumb, then you just use the same straight edge to make sure that you tighten this gap up. So I'm going to do one right on this hinge. I'm going to keep just enough pressure on there. I'm going to put this shim in. It's getting a little thick, so I'll just put 2 in. And I'm going to just make that so it touches. I want it to touch the straight edge, but I don't want it to kick it out so that it's teeter-tottering on that point. You've got to be aware of that. So just snug that. Keep some pressure on there, and I'll just throw one brad in there. It's very important that, along with being plumb, that it's straight as well, because that can affect how the hinges all work together. Now I think it's actually pretty good. A lot of times I'll have to put one in the center here, which I will. This shim can be a little thicker. Just because there's no hinge in the way, it's easier to cut. Make sure you don't push it out enough too much. or it'll make it teeter-totter. I'm just going, okay, so 2 inches in, tag that. I won't go silly on this. Okay, so just finish the rest. Make this nice and straight, which we will. Then we'll set this other side plumb and make it the exact same as this one. So this side's set now. It's straight, plumb, both directions. I'll do the exact same setup here. Well, you've already seen it. I'll do the exact same thing here. Then it's time to hang the doors, double check, and then once we make sure that it's perfect, then we can totally set this jamb. Okay, so now everything is set the way I want it. These are both plumb as best as I can do. I think it's perfect, but the doors will be the judge of that. So we've got those, and we have them both set plumb this way. Now let's talk physics a little bit, because I don't want to hang these heavy solid core doors on just a couple of brad nails right now. Because when I open this door and this door, it can put weight and push the jambs in this way at the bottom. So I want to secure the very bottom, but also want to secure the very top so that the weight of them doesn't pull these inward or change anything. So I'm just going to set 2 screws on each side. Now, here's a tool that's going to be handy for you, is a countersink. So it'll just kind of pre-drill and allow the screw head to go in. And what's nice about that is I'm going to go a little deeper than normal. That way I'm not trying to get my screw to sink flush or below the surface, because if I put a lot of torque, it's going to throw my jamb way out of whack. So I basically just want them snug on there. So you have to be like screws, definitely. I'll use these on these heavy doors, and it is nice. It is a very secure door. You just have to be careful. If you put too much torque, it can throw it off, and then you have to pull it out, adjust your shims, and then redo it. But we'll just we'll set them here, center of the shims, 2 inches in from where the door sits flush. Like I said, I'll go a little deep so that I don't have to put tons of torque on it. 2 inches in. So really, I'm securing the door so it won't change on me, but I'm not totally fastening it in case I do have some adjustments to make. It's a nice combination using brad nails and screws together. The brads allow me to set the door where I want it, double check, tweak it if I need to, and then the screws are good just to secure it for a long life down the road. The other good thing about using brad nails is I put the screw in the center of the shims, but then I always just try to brad nail on either side. That way when I'm cutting the shims off, they're not like twisting and falling and getting all messed up, right? It's easier to cut if you have a screw plus tag with a couple brads. Then when you're cutting them, you can just break them off easier. They're not flopping around. Okay, we're set. We're almost ready to hang these doors. I just want to show you another vital tool and a step to do before you start. So now I'm going to replace the countersink bit with the center punch bit. This center punch bit is basically made for number 8 screw. This thing spins independently, and it just allows me to find center of my hinge of this hole, and I'm going to just pre-drill these hinges. Now, why I'm doing that is because I could definitely just go ahead and sink some screws in through these holes, but no matter what, no matter how careful you are, your screw either goes in crooked or finds the wrong grain, and it'll either push your hinge away or go crooked. So this center punch just allows me to get a nice start for my screw. That way my screw's going nice and square, it doesn't mess up my hinges. So, and it's easy, it's a cheap tool, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. So let's just pre-drill where my screws are going. And if anything, I want to just keep it tighter, so if my screw is slightly off center, it'll push it tighter into the jamb. And I only want to go in about 1/8 of an inch. I don't want to go too deep because I want lots of strength for when the screw goes in. This just allows me to do a nice start. So now those are all ready for screws. I'll do that on the entire jamb. I've already done it on the doors. Then I just, well, these are ball bearing hinges. I can't separate them. So what I did is I put the hinges on the doors, pre-drilled this, then I'll just get someone's help. I'll place these in, but at least when I'm doing it, I'm not fighting with the screws. So I'll go do that and we'll show you the next clip and we'll hang these doors now. So on a normal door, if you buy hollow core doors, you use just a regular hinge. What you do is you just center punch where your screws go, separate all your hinges, put one side on your jamb, the other side on your door. And usually the part with the 3 knuckles goes on your jamb, and the other side will have 2 knuckles. That goes on your door. Put them on either side. Just leave them just a tiny bit loose so it's easier to actually mesh them together and drop the pins in. Now today, with solid core doors, I'm using ball bearing hinges. I can't actually separate the 2 pieces. So what I did is pre-drilled and center punched all my screw holes on the jamb. I've done it on the doors, but I'll actually put the hinges loosely on the doors. I'll get someone's help. We'll lift them in place. We'll fasten them. With them being loose, it allows us just to tweak it just ever so slightly to get everything to go into their mortises. We'll tighten them all up, and then we'll see how these doors sit. Put our doors on. The hinges were loose to allow us to line everything up, but we want to make sure that they're all tight so that everything's accurate. And then the other thing I did so that I could actually open and close these doors today without any hassle is I just set 2 screws in. Now, I place those right there on purpose. Now, the rest of the doors are 44 inches down from the top, so I made a mark on the center, and then their back set's 2 3/4. And we're just going to use a dummy latch set that just gets screwed to the door, and they'll go centered right on that. So that's not going to affect anything. The doors still need to be painted, so I'm not going to put them on until afterward. Okay, so this is why you don't want to get too carried away. You don't want to cut your shims off. You don't want to assume anything because the doors are just slightly out. Now, they're out. Well, one way is you want to check, make sure they're flush all the way top and bottom, but as well is this door is sitting a little bit higher than the other. And another way to tell that is the gap at the bottom is a little bit tighter, which should mean that this one has to get dropped. So therefore, that jamb has to go in a little bit, and then that'll make that gap more even at the bottom and at the top. So with that, before I also want to see if I have to tweak anything else on this. So I'm just going to make these so that they're flush at the top. Okay, and then I'm going to check the bottom. Yeah, it's just slightly out as well. And you don't want that. I'm just going to make a note on the floor. If anything, this jamb has to go in, or this jamb has to come back out. And I'll just determine which one I want to do based on how the jamb's centered over the drywall. So now with the fact that this one has to be dropped, and actually just to confirm that, I want to just put my level on there. I want to just judge by what the level says to make sure that this one has to be dropped and the other one doesn't have to be raised. Yeah, and that's the case. So one thing is when you're making a correction like this, you have to make sure that when you're tapping your shims that you don't really twist it out of place. So you can just make marks on the floor so that you know where your jambs need to be. So it's just a double checking game. I want to drop this one now, so I'll leave everything in place. I'll basically just take that screw out of the bottom, pull my shims out. I gotta suck it in, make sure my doors match, then I gotta make this jamb straight again. So it is a little bit of a hassle, but you know, these doors are here for life, so they have to look good now. Okay, so I guess first thing I'll judge which jamb I want to adjust. So that one, or do I adjust this one? Okay, so with this side that was a little bit out of plumb, I had to tweak this. So I'm already kind of, my jam's in a little bit this way and out at the top. So I don't want to adjust this one. I'll make the correction all on this one. That way I don't have to, hopefully I don't have to touch that side. So I pulled that screw. Maybe what I can do is I'll tap this out. I'll check, get the doors nice and flush. Then I can mark where my jamb has to go. Then I know where that has to be. I can adjust my shims. Then I'll double check everything, make sure that that's where I want it. Then I'll fasten it. Okay, so this had to go out. So I'll just grab a shim. I don't want to hit the wood with my hammer, especially with a finished jamb. I'll just tap this out. Okay. And then I'm just going to keep checking these doors to make sure they're flush. So I still have to go a little bit more, or I might even just take the top in a little bit. The other thing that could affect that is if the doors aren't perfectly straight. If one door is twisted, that'll throw that off a little bit as well. Okay, so you know what the plan is. It's going to take me a little bit to get that going. I'm not sure if you want to watch that, but I'll show you as I get it. We'll show you later, and I'll show you what I did. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or check us out on some of the following.